Hey everyone, this is session 3. It's going to be a video lecture of your blueprint reading class. Tonight we're going to be discussing drawing views and projections. But before we dive into that, we have a little bit more work to do on line types. Last week we talked about the 3 most common line types: object, hidden, and centerline, and how they are used in our drawings. And even did a little bit of a sketch using each of those 3 line types to provide information for the part that we drew. And we're going to get back to that in a second. But before we do that, we're going to talk about extension lines, dimension lines, and leader lines. So if you've got your outline available, if not, we're going to put it up on the screen here. It is on Blackboard, session 3, drawing views and projections. But the very first topic at the top, extension, dimension, and leader lines. For your text, it's going to start in Unit 4, which is on page 18. And the very first line type is extension lines. Extension lines are used in dimensioning to show the size of an object. If you look at figure 4.1, it's a little bit vague, but it gives you a basic idea of what 2 extension lines are, what they look like on a drawing. Figure 4.2 does a little bit better of a job, gives you an object, a rectangle, and shows how the extension lines project off of that object. Now, it's a little bit different in CAD. This book kind of is more geared towards if you were to draw it by hand, where it's showing you in figure 4.2 the really, really bold object lines of our part, the rectangle, and then the extension lines, which are a little bit thinner to kind of differentiate between what actually is the object or the part and what is the extension line, which is going to give us a border basically for the size of our object. In CAD, if you've started taking CAD or you're going to take CAD, you'll find out very quickly that this is done for you. It's not something that you need to necessarily know that the object lines and the extension lines are different in their boldness and their line types. CAD has all that programmed in. So whereas 20 or 25 years ago, you may have to have used a different pencil to create your extension line than your object line, all worked out, all good, don't have to worry about that. But there is a difference between them, so that when you're looking at a drawing, you can tell where the actual part ends and where your dimension line, or your, in this case, your extension line, begins. We're also going to look at the fact that in figure 4.2, which I'm going to bounce over to now. Bear with me a second. So it's 4.1, 4.2. If you're following along the book, there is a gap between our part here, that is down the corner here, between our part and the actual extension line. That's also to give you the indication that the part has ended, and now we're talking about just a reference point, the extension line, to show you how the part is defined by size. And we're going to see that here when we get to dimension lines in figure 4.3. So bounce ahead a little bit. Dimension lines, once the external shape and internal feature part represented by a combination of lines. Now we got to put some dimensions to it. So you can see on the figure 4.3, on the left and on the right, we have 2 extension lines. And in the middle, as you can see here with the blue line there pointing to it, that is our dimension line. Those are typically capped off by arrowheads or closed-in dots. In this class, mostly what we'll be using are the arrowheads, but there are a variety of different endpoints to your dimension line that can kind of show where this particular dimension is going to and from. But again, for this particular class, and mostly what you're going to see in mechanical engineering drawings, are arrowheads being at the end of your dimension lines. So figure 4.3 is a very standard view of what we would consider our dimension lines with our extension lines, and they've even put a value in there, 2¼ inches. So if we scroll back up, or flip the page if you're following along in the book, you can kind of visualize there that rectangle having a horizontal and a vertical dimension there for the extension lines. Bring it back down, 2¼ inches would define the horizontal distance of that particular object. Now leader lines, for some reason, bounce all the way forward to Unit 9 of the text. So I'm going to do that for you real quick, and then we're going to show some actual real-world examples of leader lines because the text is a little weak in that area. But if we look at figure 9.1, up in the upper right-hand corner here, we're going to see a line with an arrow, and then it kind of jolts out and comes out to the letter R, a decimal point, and XX. That's what we refer to as a leader line. You'll see right next to it in the vertical orientation, we've got an extension line right here. We've got some dimension lines that are capped off by arrowheads. And then we've got point XXX. That's just a generic way of saying some value belongs here, but we're not really concerned with what the value is right now. We're just concerned with what it means, what this presentation means. But if we bounce back up here to where we started, we've got the line that's coming off, the dimension line with capped off by an arrowhead, and then a little bit more of a line, the R and the XX. Now that's what we would refer to as a leader line. Not exactly the same as an extension line, but pretty much does the same thing in effect. Gives us information about the part. In this particular case, gives us what the radius value is for this particular object. Same is true down here. If you're looking here, we've got a funny symbol that we haven't talked about yet. And then we have X, decimal point XX. And we see that it's got a little bit of a line that comes down and it hits this hole here. And we see the dimension line capped off by arrowheads. Again, that's what we would refer to as a leader line. Scrolling a little bit ahead here in Unit 9, we're going to take a look here. Some other examples of leader lines. These are a little bit different. If you're looking at the far left here, the blue line here, we've got an arrowhead, a leader line, and it's pointing out to some text here that says 5/6 hex stud. Basically letting us know that the head of this particular bolt or this particular fastener is hexagon. So not only can leader lines be used to provide information for sizes, it can also be used to provide information for notes. So if we go back over to your Session 3 outline, which we will real quick here. All right, so down there, the third bullet, leader lines, used to direct notes, dimension symbols, item numbers or part numbers to features on the drawing. Now, we haven't talked about symbols yet. That's that R and that funky little thing that we saw there in the other view. We haven't talked about item numbers or part numbers, but we will. Point is, leader lines are used to direct notes and dimensions. These are the things that we'll talk about soon. We'll bounce back over real quick. So 5/6 hex stud, leader line there that points down to the actual top of this particular fastener, letting us know that it's a hexagon head. And then if we want to go through and see, yep, there's that funny symbol we haven't talked about in a 36. That's letting us know a piece of information about that portion of the part. Again, same funny symbol, 30, letting us know some dimensional information about that piece of the part. And then finally the 25SQ, which stands for square, and you can see up here in this view at the top here that that's a square piece, letting us know that that particular piece there, when looking at it in a two-dimensional view, that's a square part. So we are going to bounce back to Unit 4 and make sure that we covered extension lines, yep, and dimension lines. And again, here, the very first part that we saw, rectangle, we've got the horizontal and the vertical dimensions. We see the extension lines and the dimension lines here, and the values placed in each one, letting us know how long this piece is horizontally and how tall it is vertically. So figure 4.4 kind of gives us an overview. If we go and bounce all the way back here to figure 4.2, when we first started seeing the extension lines, down to 4.4, giving us the full definition of how large this part is. Again, the extension lines come off the part. Dimension lines are capped off by the arrowheads. We've got the value in the middle there, and that's going to define the part for us in the horizontal direction and in the vertical direction. Okay, so last week we did, let's see, before we do that, let's go over here. Okay, so this comes from Drexel University. They've got quite a variety of drafting tools on their website. I should be showing that website. Let me make sure, bounce back here. Let's see. Doesn't look like you can see it from the screen share, but if you're interested, I will share it with you. Quite a few good details on different drafting techniques. This particular one is talking about the do's and don'ts of dimensioning. So we just talked about extension lines, dimension lines, arrowheads, and leader lines. The slide that we're looking at now basically shows you what to do and how not to do or apply dimensions. Now, this isn't a class that's necessarily teaching you how to put dimensions on a drawing, but how to read them off of it. So what you do want to see when you're looking at drawings is what we have over here on the left, the A views here that say good grouping. This is what you're going to pretty much come into contact with when you're looking at drawings. This is what you want to see. Here we've got a block that's got two holes in it when we're looking down from this particular view. We see that the first hole here, the smaller hole, is a ½ an inch from this bottom corner, 0.63 inches from the corner, the same corner. If you go over here to the poor grouping and you're looking for where that hole is defined and how you're dimensioning it, well, we're coming off the top edge here, 1.25, but then we've got to come all the way over to the other side of the part to figure out where it is in the the horizontal dimension. Not a good way of presenting it. If we look at the larger hole, up here in the good grouping on the A side, we've got 0.88 coming over from the right-hand side to the center of the hole. 0.63, we're coming from that same corner down to the center of the hole. If we come over here to the way that it's not displayed well, we're coming off the left edge for the horizontal dimension. We're coming off of this corner over here for the vertical dimension. And it just becomes very messy and very difficult to understand exactly where that hole is located. Same thing down here, down the bottom if we're looking at this view, and we're going to get into view projections so you know exactly what we're looking at here in a bit. But the way that this notch here is presented, we've got a little cutout here in our part. We're coming off the right-hand side, 1½ inches to show you how horizontally that notch is cut. And then from that same virtual corner down 0.75 inches to show you that version. Over here, we're kind of all over the place. We're coming off the upper left-hand side down 0.75. This 2.25 from a completely different corner. These are the types of things that you don't want to see when you're reading drawings. And if you're going to get into CAD and you're going to start presenting your own drawings, you definitely don't want to be grouping your dimensions in this type of a fashion. If we take a look at the top here, at this top view, this is another thing that's a good practice, but isn't always completely doable. The orange text here says, do not use lines of the model as dimension extension lines. Definitely something that you want to try to avoid, but not something that's always avoidable. So if we look at this 2½ dimension here that's notching, or that's dimensioning this notch in our cutout here, we're putting it right on our model, we're putting it right on our part, instead of coming up here with some extension lines and pulling it up above the part. We're putting it right on the part. Now, that's not good practice, but we're going to see here in a little bit, there's an example of one where it's either necessary or it's difficult to avoid, but not good practice. Same here with this 1-inch dimension that we see here. It's right on the part. The extension lines or the dimension lines are outside here, touching right on the part. Same thing here, not good practice. You don't want to see it dimensioned this way. Now we're going to scroll down a bit here and look at some other things. Examples of wrong dimensioning. And again, we're not necessarily showing you guys how to dimension a part, but what you should expect to see. Now on the left-hand side of the screen here, you see something that says incorrect. What we've got here is a 5-inch dimension that's going, extension line coming off the part on the left-hand side, extension line coming off the part on the right-hand side. But what's the problem here? The largest dimension is the first one we see off the part, and then we've got extension lines cutting through it for these smaller pieces. Now if we come down to the bottom here, we kind of get a better idea of what we're looking at. We've got a 5-inch dimension that goes from all the way from the left all the way to the right, and then for the notch, we bring those dimensions down to the bottom. 2 inches over to the beginning of the notch, 3.25 inches over to the end of the notch. Very clean, much better presented. There's other ways of doing it. Over here, you put the 5 inches all the way across, 2 inches out to the beginning, 1.25 inches for the notch. Looks pretty good. Same thing for the bottom right here. 5 inches all the way over to the end, 2 inches out to the beginning of the notch, 3.25 inches out to the end of the notch, and much better way of presenting it. Same for these guys over here in the corner. 1.25" up to the bottom, 2.25" up to the very top. If we look up to the incorrect version, we can see that this extension line is going straight through the 2.25". Not a good way of presenting it. Doesn't mean that you won't see it that way or come across some really poor drawings. But if you're the one creating the drawings, like you're about to here in a minute, you don't want to do that type of dimensioning. You want to put your dimensions in an order, in a fashion, display them where they make sense, where they are easily recognizable as to which features that they are dimensioning, and that they don't get over top of each other like we see in the upper left-hand corner. All right. So we had a class exercise last week where we drew this guy, our locking tab. And really quickly, we will go over what we did last week. We sketched out these two views where we used the concepts that we learned about object lines, hidden lines, and center lines to get these two views of our locking tab. What we also did was filled in some of our format information, mostly in the title block. So if you've got your locking tab sketch handy, you can certainly pause the video if you don't. But if you do, we're going to take a quick look at the title block to make sure that it was filled in the way that we had instructed us to do so. So the title was going to be locking tab. So down here in this block here, we should have written locking tab. The drawing number was ENGT 102-001. So that should be in our drawing number block. The drawn by, or the DR block, should have been your initials. Right now it says XXX. That's whatever your initials are. In the CHK block, for the check block, that would be my initials, MJH. We had a next assembly, which we talked about last week, which is where this piece is going to be used next, which drawing it's going to be used next in. And that particular piece of information was ENGT 102-200. And then if we jump up to the top here, we filled in our revision block. It was revision 1, and the description of revision 1 was our initial sketch. And those were the things that we filled in last week during the class exercise. So this week, what we want to do is take that same sketch and we're going to add a little bit more to it. So if we look here, I'll zoom in a little bit to make it a little easier to see. And this is actually on the Blackboard page for session 3. So if it's difficult to follow along in the video, if it's difficult to see, please log on to the session 3 Blackboard page and you will find this drawing with this information on it. So our first bullet point there says material, see note 1. And just a quick hint, down here in your title block, which we discussed a little bit last week, or actually quite a lot last week, we've got a space for material. So I'm going to give you a little giveaway there. The very first thing you're going to do in the material block, see note 1. But then we're going to actually make a note 1. Upper left-hand corner of our screen is where we're going to put our notes. Note 1 should be steel plate, 0.375 thick. We discussed a little bit last week too about the block tolerance down in our title block. So we want to make the 2-place decimal block tolerance 0.03. And I'm not going to zoom in to show you that. I'm hoping you remember. Also, we discussed about in our title block our sheets. This is only going to be a 1-sheet drawing, so we want to make sure that our sheet block says 1 of 1. And since we've added some things to our sketch, we're going to bump up our revision. So up here in the upper right-hand corner in our revision area, we're going to make this revision 2, and the description is going to be dimensioned sketch. Now, in order for that to be true, in order for this to be a dimensioned sketch, let's go ahead and put some extension lines and some dimension lines and maybe a leader line, maybe say here for this hole in the middle. And I'm not concerned with what values you place on these because we have not drawn it to scale. But if we go back and we take a look at the pages that we looked at in the book here in Unit 4, we obviously see an extension line, dimension lines ended off with arrows and a value. So we see that horizontally, we see that vertically. If you want to go over here and use the drawings from the Drexel site, that's a good idea too. We see quite a good bit of good grouping dimensions here, showing us extension, dimension, and over here on our holes, some leader lines. Use those and put some dimensions on our sketch. Do the best you can. I know this is your first try, but that's going to be class exercise number 1. On your class outline, it's referred to as class exercise locking tab. It says dimension the locking tab sketch and add information to format. And the information is the 5 bullet points, and we're going to dimension the sketch. So let's make sure we give it a horizontal and vertical length, dimension the hole, make sure we know where the hole is, the distance from one edge out to the center, the distance from the bottom up to the center. And if you have to, bounce over here to this Drexel page. I'm going to post this Drexel page in the video comments so that you guys can get to it easily. But use this as an example and bounce back over here and go ahead and put some dimensions on that. And bring that to class with you this coming Monday, and we will go over it. I will have a view to project up on the screen to show you exactly how a couple different ways this could look, because there's no really one way of doing this. It can be done in quite a few ways. All right, so using our outline, we're going to bounce ahead to views. And we're going to talk about front, top, and side views, which if you've got your textbook, we are going to bounce over to Unit 6, 3-view drawings, and take a look at what we mean by views. Now in 3-view drawings, we're typically talking about the front view, the top view, and the side view. So we're taking a part, and we're going to lay it out and give ourselves pretty good detailed information about each one of these views. Now, if we look at figure 6.1, and I'm going to bounce to it in my book here real quick as well. This talks about projecting the image for the front view. Now we see our object back here in the upper right-hand corner, and the view is projected forward. And it's taking a 3-dimensional object, and it's kind of smashing it to a 2-dimensional plane. And the image here is on the front, and that's what we're going to refer to as our view. Now there's no right, wrong, or other way of telling you which view should be your front view. It'll be obvious when we take a look at an example here in a minute, but when you're the one that's putting the drawing together, you're picking what the front view is, and then you're projecting out from that. And we'll take a look at that here in a second. But you can see, with this particular type of projection, the object sits behind the view plane. So the object is here, everything's projected onto 2 dimensions, and instead of seeing the depth and this ledge here, all we're seeing are the 2D projected views onto this front plane. Now if we scroll down, this is just kind of giving us another view here of how we're getting the front view, calling this the frontal plane of projection. Now we're going to move on to the top view. And it's kind of like you're almost putting your part in a glass box and then rotating the box around to kind of see the different views of your object. So we've got the front plane here. We've taken our object, smashed everything into 2 dimensions, boom, front view. Now, if we were to fold this glass box out upward, we can see the same thing happens. The view from the 3D, or the 3D object, gets its view pushed up to the top, and all you get is a 2D outline of whatever you would see looking down from this arrow here. So if you see the arrows pointing down, everything's being pushed to that particular view plane. So we have a front view, and then up here, looking down on top, we have our top view. And when it folds out and you actually put it onto a drawing, it looks like this. Bounce back up here again real quick to kind of give you guys an idea of what we're doing here. We're taking this glass box, and you can see here, it looks like it's almost got hinges on it, like we're going to bend it outward, which is exactly what we're doing. We're projecting the two-dimensional profile of this object up to the top plane here. And we're folding that out to keep everything two-dimensional to show our top view of this particular item. You can see the rotation arrows here. Moving on to the side view, we're going to put it back into the box. We're going to put it back into the glass box. We're going to fold it back up. So we've got the front view here, same as the beginning. Top view here, pushed up to the top. Side view, everything in blue here is being projected out to this two-dimensional plane. If you notice, if we bounce back to last session, what we've got here in the front view, all object lines. Heavy dark lines showing us the outer portion of our object. We've got the hole there in the middle, and we've even got this little piece here. Pushing up to the top view, you can see, whoa, we wouldn't actually be able to see this hole in the top view. So what's that represented by? Represented by hidden lines, those dashed lines that we talked about last week. Same thing here for the side view. Pushing the side view profile out, we've got these dashed lines here, which are representing this hole. Those are our hidden lines for that hole. And then this dashed line here, this back edge of this ledge. So you really only would see this blue that's right in here, but you got that edge back there that's creeping. So you have the hidden line there that's representing that edge. And again, these two hidden lines that are representing the hole, which you wouldn't be able to see if you were looking into the side. So in our closed-in box here, we've got our front, top, our side view, and when we fold it all out, we end up with a three-view drawing. Our front view, all object lines. We've got our hole in the middle. You can see the white through it that's making it look like that there's some space behind there. Fold out to the top, our hidden lines that represent that hole. And then also over to the side, the two hidden lines that represent the hole, and the hidden line that represents this edge right back here. And then also in the top view, it's that corner that's right there. And that's how we project out to three views. Now, in a real world situation, let's see if I've got her called up. No, I don't. So, this is a drawing, arm base bracket, one that I've worked on quite extensively. You see, I've got a whole bunch of notes up here in the upper left-hand corner, which in your class exercise, you just added note 1, which gave us the material. We've got a whole bunch of revisions up here in the upper right-hand corner, which we talked about last week, and then in our class exercise, we added revision 2. This one's up to revision 3. Zoom back out a little bit so you can see everything, but let's go ahead and go over the three views here. Okay, so right here, dead smack in the middle, and let's talk zones, because we talked zones last week as well. Zones were the letters that go up the sides of our drawings and the numbers that go across the bottom and the top of our drawings. So if we're looking at zone B5, that's going to put us in the front view. So let's get there real quickly. Zoom in so we can get a nice good picture of it here. All right, zone B5, front view of our part. Now a little bit ago, we looked at the Drexel page that said, don't put your dimensions right on your part. Well, look, smack dab right there in the middle. We've got an extension line coming off the top of our part here. We've got a dimension line with an arrowhead, and boom, it is right on the part. Now, in this particular case, there is a funny little edge here that you can kind of see over in this view that kind of makes it difficult to know exactly where that's pointing to. So in this particular case, the person who checked this drawing said, you know what, in order to make this as clear as it can possibly be, we're going to put the dimension line on the part. And that's what I meant when I said that there's sometimes going to be exceptions where you're not going to get away from putting the dimension line right on the part. This is one such example. We try to avoid it when we can. It's not always possible, and sometimes it's just easier for the person who is taking a look at this item to understand what's going on if it's right on the part. This is one such example. But we've got a wide variety of things going on here. We've got lots of extension lines. We've got dimension lines. Here's a leader. It's got a little 7 here. We'll talk about that in a second, pointing to this box. Here's another leader. It's got that R symbol that we haven't discussed yet, 28.6. Some angle extension lines here that talk about the angle of this particular feature of the part. But this is our front view. And when we fold this out to a top and a side view, we're going to scroll up. This is our top view. We are looking downward onto our part to this top view. We've only got one dimension here. It's got our extension lines, dimension lines, arrowheads, and our value. If we move over to the right, here's our right view, our side view. Projected out as if we're folding the box out to see everything that we need to see here. Now next week, I'm going to bring this physical part in and kind of give you guys an idea of exactly how this would fold out. But hopefully you're able to kind of visualize it here with the drawing and these three views. Now we've got some other views here, and we'll talk about those in some upcoming sessions. But your three main views, your front, your top, and your right, all presented on the drawing, all with dimension lines, extension lines, plenty of values, plenty of things, plenty of information to gather from it. If we go back to our class outline, the very next topic here is first and third angle projection. Now this bounces all the way to unit 24 of our text. So let me get over to that really quickly for you. You guys can get over there too. And I'll start off by saying we only use third angle projection. Now this particular textbook covers first angle projection, mostly because there are other countries throughout the world that use it, but the United States does not. And I think it's for good reason, because it is incredibly confusing. It is pretty much the exact opposite of everything we just talked about in how these views get projected. So I'll quickly show you an example here. So here's our box again. We see we have a part here in the middle, and all of our views get projected out from the part. So we have our part and the front view, boom, right there on that front plane. Top view goes up, and when you fold out the entire box, you get a front, a top, and a right side. The object is the center of attention, and all of the views get projected out from it. First angle projection works the exact opposite way. And, excuse me. And they do not seem to have a, let's see, yeah, here we go. So figure 24-3 gives you the opposite way that it would work in a first angle projection, where everything gets presented away from it. So instead of all of the views coming toward you and the plane being between you and the object, now the object is between you and the plane. It makes it very, very difficult to even understand what's going on. So here we have our front view, okay? Object is in front of us, and the view is being projected away from us. You can see here on the plane here. Same thing with the side view. Object is here, view is being projected out, and oddly enough, the top view ends up being on the bottom. Probably one of the most confusing things about first angle projection is that when you refer to your top view, it's actually underneath of your front view because the object is in the center. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on first angle projection because we do not use it. You absolutely will not see it on any American-made drawing, and you won't see it on most British drawings either. I struggle to even come across the example that I could give you where I've ever seen it. But just so that you know, there are two types where the object is in the middle and the views are presented away from you. And then if we bounce back up here, where the object is in the middle and the views are presented towards you. So the view is between you and the object in third angle projection. The object is between you and the view in the first angle projection. We will not be doing any other first angle projection for the entire rest of this class. Just really want to make it known that that's what it is. That if you ever come across first angle projection, object is between you and the view. And this whole silly thing about how your front view and your top view is below your front view. Very, very strange. We will be doing all third angle projection once again here in our glass box, where the object is the center and the projections come out towards you. Let's see. Okay, so moving along, back over to our class outline. One more exercise. We're going to sketch 3 views of bracket. And I'm going to go ahead and call that up on the screen here once again. This is in the session 3 Blackboard page. So please go there in order to call this up and have it in front of you, other than the video. But we've got a very similar drawing as we did last week. I want to see if you guys can sketch out 3 views of this. Got a pretty simple bracket here. It's got a 90-degree bend on it. 2 holes up here in the top face, 1 hole in the bottom. You can pick any view that you want to start off as your front view. And remember, let's get back over here. In this particular case, this view is selected as the front view. It didn't need to be. Any view can be selected as the front view. It's just how you work from that point that's important. So if you want to have the front view looking in this way, where you see these 2 holes as your front view, fine. If you want to have the front view looking in this way, where you see the kind of L shape of the bracket, that's fine. What's important is that when we go to project the views out to do the top view and the side view, that you project them correctly. You can bounce back over here to figure 24.2 to kind of give you an idea of how to do that. But what we're going to do is sketch 3 views of this particular bracket. That's bullet point number 1, front, top, and side, and once again using 3rd angle projection. Remember that there is such a thing as 1st angle projection, but please don't spend too much time wrapping your head around that, because chances are that you will never see it on an actual drawing that you'll come across. Bullet point number 2, drawing title bracket. Remember where that goes down here in our title block from last week. Drawing number ENGT 102-002. Remember where that goes down here in our title block. The scale of this drawing is going to be none. If you remember last week, we talked about what scales are on drawings, mostly when you're doing computer-aided drafting, presenting your object at a larger or smaller size than it actually is. In this particular case, we're just doing a sketch. There's no specific scale because I haven't given you any dimensions to work from. So we're going to use scale none. Drawn by the DR block, again, is going to be your initials. Checker, CHK block, again, will be me, MJH. And once again, we're doing revision 1, and it's our initial sketch. So last week, you got 2 formats. You got 2 C-sized formats. The first one you did your locking tab sketch on, which you'll be working on adding the dimensions to and the additional information. And the second one remained blank when you left. And that's what you're going to use to do the 3 views of this bracket, front, top, and side, and filling in the required information. And lastly here, the session 3 homework assignment. If you go back over to the Blackboard page or go there at some other time, you'll see that the second piece of information on session 3 is the homework assignment. 2 things. From textbook page 20, assignment A, unit 4, angle brace, and from the textbook pages 32 and 33, assignment A, unit 6, angle bracket. There are a couple of questions there to answer, mostly regarding the topics that we talked about tonight with extension dimension lines, leader lines, and then also view projections. So you're going to be asked to see, identify certain lines, certain edges. When you fold out a view, what does this represent? What does that represent? To make sure that you understand exactly what it is that you're looking at. Let's see. Oh, and this is another 1st angle, 3rd angle projection sort of explanation. Once again, over here on the left-hand side is the 1st angle, where this particular symbol is U, then the object, then the plane. 3rd angle, U, the plane, the object. Kind of gives you a little bit different perspective than the book did. Once again, 3rd angle is what we're going to be focusing on. That's your locking tab exercise. Please make sure that you do that and bring it back. Again, the values that you put into the dimensions are not important, but let's try to make them at least be consistent. So if the value from the bottom corner here to the top, let's just say you make that 2 inches. When you go ahead and do the bottom corner to the center of the hole, obviously it's going to have to be less than 2 inches. The value that you make it, completely up to you, but let's not make the bottom to the top 2 inches and the bottom to the hole 4 inches, because that just certainly wouldn't make any sense. So go ahead and do that. Make sure you bring that next week to class. Again, I will post the link to, because I just switched this over. I had another link in the Blackboard, which if you click on is going to be a dead link. They must have shut that page down from the last time we did the class. But this is really good information, and I will put this link up there for the Drexel page to show you good dimensioning practices and bad dimensioning practices. And there's quite a few slides here. Kind of goes all over the place if you want to delve in a little bit more. Even talks about dimensioning in AutoCAD for anybody that's actually taking an AutoCAD class. Kind of gives you some pointers on how to set that up. But I will put that link in the Blackboard. We'll close that down. Let's see. Okay, again, the units are on the class outline, so please go back and look at those in the text. The book is actually really, really good at showing you the fold-outs for the third angle projection for the front view, the top view, and the right side view. So if while you're doing the bracket sketch, you kind of aren't quite sure how you're supposed to project these out, please go back to Unit 24 and take a look at that, because it does do a really good job of explaining that. Back to our class outline here, and I think we're pretty much wrapped up. Quite a few class exercises this week. So the video lecture isn't quite as long as maybe future ones will be. But please make sure you bring the locking tab sketch and the bracket sketch with you next week. We'll go over both. We'll talk through any questions or issues you might have with dimensioning, as well as the third angle projection and how to get a front, a top, and a right side view. Again, we're really just more focused on trying to understand what each of these views are, not necessarily how to put them onto a drawing. That's going to definitely be another class that you guys do if you continue on with any sort of CAD classes or solid modeling classes. You will absolutely learn those types of things. This is so that you understand, if a drawing is presented in front of you, what these views mean. You're going to try to glean the information from them. You're going to take information away from these dimensions that you're seeing and understand what's being presented to you. So that's the main focus and the main takeaway for tonight. Any questions, please email me at my harford.edu address. And actually, one more quick thing. As was discussed in the intro video, in order to receive credit for this class, you can watch this video whenever you want and as many times as you want. I don't want to watch it more than once, but if you do, that's great. But to at least get credit for attending this session, please leave a comment in the comments section. Again, if you don't have a Google account or a YouTube account, it may come up as an anonymous comment. And if that's the case, that's fine. Just please leave your name in it so that I know that you watched it. And then you will receive credit for attending this particular session, which is a good chunk of your grade. So I would highly suggest taking the 10 seconds to just throw a comment on there. You can say anything you want. Doesn't matter. Just, hey, watch the video. Good job. So, okay, we'll see you next Monday. Please bring those 2 sketches back with you. Those are your class assignment sketches, and also the homework that is on the Blackboard. Any questions, shoot me an email, and I will see you guys in 1 week.